Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmadu nasalli ala Rasul Kareem. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask him send peace and blessing on our Prophet Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We're reading the book, obviously, of Ibn Rajab Al-Hanbali, Rahimahulla. Jazakallah khair for that. So, we're reading the book of Ibn Rajab Rahimullah on the horrors of the grave. The book is called Ahwaalul Quboor. Hole in Arabic means horror. And so the horrors and the realities of the grave, what's in the grave. So went through a lot of details. Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, 600 years ago, he detailed all the narrations, strong ones, weak ones, and he mentions which ones are which, and gives us a very detailed picture of what's in the qabr and what's happening. So the chapter that we're doing today, the معرفة الموتى بمن يزورهم ويسلم عليهم, the dead knowing who visits them and who gives salam to them. So they recognize the people who visit them and also who gives salam. So the first narration he mentions, and he gives all these narration with chains of narration, like he heard it from so, heard it from so, and all these people can be checked. So this is a scientific method of especially historical events and sayings, that so and so. Then each narrator, there's encyclopedia. People have gone to check and find out who this person was all their life. So this is the science of hadith. It's called Asma'ul Rijal. It's a sub-science in the science of hadith. Why is a hadith sahih or not sahih? One of the reasons each person is checked. His whole life story is put on. And to such an extent, such imams were so particular. Like even though one of them, the father passed away, the son, he was an imam in the next, he said, my father had a problem at the end of his life, for example, that he used to make mistakes. So don't take his narration from his later of his life. He made mistakes in them. He used to mix up things. I mean, that's how honest they were. That, of course, it's father's reputation, not an easy thing to mention the wrongs of a father or mistakes of a father. But when it came, their loyalty to the deen and the sunnah and the words of Rasulullah, that is possible he could have got it wrong. Therefore, that was more important. Deen was more important. So he narrates a chain narration. Then he says that the narrations are attributed to Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. And there was a Sahabi, Abu Razin, he said, Ya Rasulullah, in my road, in the path, there are dead, meaning there's a graveyard. If I speak to them, should I speak to them when I pass by them? So Rasulullah said, say, Assalamu alaikum ya Ahlul Quboor min al-Muslimin al-Mu'mineen. Assalamu alaikum, O the people of the grave, from the Muslims, the graves of the Muslims and the believers. Antum lana salaf, you are forerunners, you are before us. Wa nahnu lakum taba', we are following you. وَإِنَّا إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ بِكُمْ لَاحِقُونَ, and one day we will meet up with you. One day we'll reach you, one day we'll be with you. And Abu Razin said, Ya Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, do they hear us? And said, they hear, but they cannot speak and they cannot answer. Wouldn't you like that the angels reply to you basically instead? So alright, you can't hear their reply, but when you give salam, you can't hear what they're saying, or they can't reply, but the malaika will reply instead to you. And then he mentioned narration, that there's this person narration, because this person, we don't know. Sometimes what happens in chain narration, two people have the same name. So we don't know whether there's a strong narrator, there's Ahmad bin Khalid, and there's another Ahmad bin Khalid. Which Ahmad Khalid was it? So then there's a problem now. Now we have a problem. Which narrator is it? Could possibly could be both. So therefore this narration at the end, he puts a caveat that, but why is Imam Rajab put it? This usually put the most authentic hadith to establish a point. But then in this chapter, there's not a lot of narrations. There's not a lot in terms of, it's not about the dua. The dua we know. It's in many, many books in different variation. The dua of visiting the graveyard. It's whether they can hear us. This is a separate issue. And do they reply to the salam? Because when you give salam, the expectation is somebody should reply to the salam. So can the dead, if they can hear that salam, what else can they hear? So there's a lot of issues that can come out of this. The core issues we've covered. Reward in the grave, punishment in the grave, the angels asking questions. Now is about whether they know people can visit other, to do with us more. This is more to do with us. There's a hakam for us. And it's not about the condition of the people in the grave. It's more about the people, our relationship with the people who passed away. So he mentioned that the narration, Imam Awza'i narrated from Ata, and gives the chain narration to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. The Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, never does a person pass by a grave of his brother, believing brother, except that he knows that he knew in the dunya, except that he gives salam to him, and he recognizes him, and he replies to his salam. And he said that Kharaj ibn Abdul Bar. Ibn al-Bar is one of the great Imams. Like I mentioned, I think last session as well, that he's like, you can put him in the top 100 of the Imams of the Muslims from Spain. Great muhaddis and faqih and jurist, one of the giants. And also he said, وقال, and he said that Abdul Haq al-Ishbili, does anybody know where Ishbili is? Seville in Spain. So this was the first capital of the Muslim. Before Qurtuba, the first capital, Cordova, the first capital of the Muslims in Spain was Musa bin Nusayr when he conquered. That was a city that was established on behalf of the Banu Umayyah as the capital of the Iberian Peninsula, which includes Portugal, but that was Seville. So if you see names Ishbili, that means they were from Seville in Spain. It's still there, it's a city. Isnadu Sahih, and he said that this chain of narration is authentic. Another narration mentioned that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that he stood at the grave of Musa bin Umair radiallahu anhu, when he was returning back from Uhud. And he stood there and his companions as well. Now we know Musa bin Umair is that person that Rasulullah sent as the first ambassador. He gave da'wah to the people of Medina Munawwara. There was no house in Medina Munawwara except that someone accepted. This is before the hijrah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 1 year he was sent, he taught deen, prepared Medina Munawwara, and there was every house that someone had become Muslim. In every house in Medina by the hands of Musa bin Umair. Young man, knowledgeable, from the companions of the Prophet, was selected. So when he stood at his grave, he said, فَقَالَ أَشْهَدُ أَنَّكُمْ أَحْيَاء, I bear witness that you're all alive. عِنْدَ اللَّهِ, before Allah, with Allah. فَزُورُهُمْ, then he turned to the people and said, and visit them. وَسَلِّمُوا عَلَيْهِمْ, and give them salam. I swear by the one whose hand is my soul, never does a person give salam to them except that they reply in salam until Qiyamah. So then there's other narrations. They're weak narrations, but they sort of corroborate this incident. And then he mentioned that maybe some of the there is a weakness to the narration, but also at the same time, and there's a ambiguity to the narration. Is this specifically for the shuhada? That they have this, is this specifically, because you don't see this being said about other. So it brings a question mark. So Imam Ibn Rajab is exploring the issue, and so it's not so black, these things are not so black and white. So people, to make them black and white, more than what the narrations have mentioned that reach right up to Rasulullah Sahaba regarding graves and pious people and shuhada, that might be going over the top. Some people go over the top in these matters because they're giving you absolutes in matters which even the narrators of hadith are saying, look, he's saying this, there is an issue around this. Is this specific to this? There's a lot of more questions and answers regarding this. But it might complete for us or clarify for us or make us understand the reality of what's in the grave. That the shuhada, we know for sure, because Allah says in the Quran, they have a life. And this is not mentioned about other people. There's explicitly mentioned in the Quran that they are not dead, they're alive. So when that is being said, the Quran corroborates it, but what's the reality of that? So this hadith sort of falls in line with that. So there's an academic discussion regarding this. And Abdurrahman ibn Zayd ibn Aslam, he narrated from his father, from Ata ibn Yasar, and he narrated from Abu Hurairah, the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, never does a slave pass by the friend of a Muslim man, except that Muslim man that he knew, his Muslim brother he knew in the dunya, and he gives him salam, except that he recognizes him, like he always recognizes him, and he replies to his salam. In other narrations mention that Abu Hurairah said, now it doesn't, here it says that Abu Hurairah said, the hadith doesn't mention that Rasulullah said. The statement goes to Abu Hurairah. But in matters of the unseen, when a Sahabi speaks, he can only speak from one source, which is Rasulullah. But it's because he didn't explicitly say Rasulullah said, so the ulama will point it out with one word. They'll put it there. They said that he said it, but he didn't attribute it to Rasulullah. But matters of the unseen, ghaib, like what happens in the grave on Day of Judgment, it cannot be known through study. This is not something you can figure out yourself. It can only be known through wahi. And he said, never does a person pass by the grave of a Muslim except that he gives salam, except he never passes it and never gives salam except that he's replied with salam. Another narration mentioned the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, never as a man visits his brother's grave and sits near it and like he finds comfort, solace, or company, or the word goes to socialize, and he comforts or gives salam to him, except that as long as he's there, until he gets up to walk away, he knows and he takes comfort from the person being there. So they realize that they've been. And Ibn Abi Dunya, the Muhaddis, he's narrated in his book Al-Quboor, this narration. It mentioned about Attaf ibn Khalid. He narrated from his auntie, and she said that she rode to the graves of the Shuhada of Uhud, and she went to the grave of Hamza radiallahu anhu. And there was nobody in the valley. I mean, those in those times. So this is like the Tabi'een. The narrator, he passed away about 100 years. He was born about 90 years after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it must have been like either she was a tabi'iyya or tabi'iyya, like the second or third generation. So she said that I went there. She went to the grave of Hamza radiallahu anhu. Nobody was there except for she was narrating this, except for a boy that was with her, and he was holding the animal, and there's nobody around. I prayed there, and then she was known for great ibadah and worship, and she said, like, waved and said Salamu alaikum, and he said that I heard from under the ground, wa alaikum salam. And he said, I know that I heard it, like I know that Allah created me. Like my certainty, like Allah created me, because I know that I heard. And like I know the night and the day. The night and the day. And he goes, and like, you know, what do you say? Like the hair stood on end. You know, the skin trembled, and he goes, the hair stood on end. Like she was scared. She goes, she didn't expect a salam to be coming back to her. In Sahih Muslim is narrated that Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu, when his death time came near, he said to his companions, when you bury me and you gently put the soil upon me, then stand near my grave the time that it takes to slaughter a camel and divide its meat. Not sure how long. It will take us probably a week. I don't know. We don't know how to slaughter a camel. My father, Rahimahulla, mentioned that when he was studying, came Qurbani in Medina Munawwara. He said they bought a camel for Qurbani. But they're from Pakistan, you know, from where we're from. There's no camels there. So they don't even know where to start. And the way you slaughter a camel is different to how you slaughter a cow. You do nahar, you know, there's a way to put a knife in. And now in Pakistan, Karachi, people bring the Qurbani, but in our part of the world anyway, it's not. So he said, we bought a camel, students, they bought camel, but they don't know what to do with it. You know, so then we asked one Yemeni guy, and he knew, he knew, like, I think he had a knife and so forth. He took our money, like he made a good money out of us, because we thought it was some big job to do. And basically the camel's standing there, and the knife is just put at the base, and they can just push it in and out. That's it. He took our money, went off with our money, almost for doing nothing. But so how long it takes to slaughter a camel, and then how long to distribute his meat. So we have an idea of qurbanis. We've seen qurbani of a cow. It takes a couple of hours to cut it up and so forth. So interesting that he said, so the time that it takes to slaughter it, and maybe they will cook in that time, it doesn't specify a time, right? So, and he said, until I feel comfort from you. Look, because why? And this hadith is Sahih Muslim. And look what he's mentioning something where Imam Ibn Rajab is using this as a proof, and it doesn't contradict anything we read before. That means I'll be in the grave aware of what the Sahabi Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu. I'm aware in the grave of you being there, right? And you see, and you see that how I will deal with I return back and deal with the malaika, mean the question answer to the malaika. So for that time, like while you're there, I'll take comfort the fact that you're here while I'm doing, in that. It's interesting narration how he what he's telling us regarding the condition of the person in the grave. Ibn Abi Dunya has narrated another narration that I saw in my dream. Now these are dreams, and he gives a chain narration for the dream. I saw Asim al-Jahdari in my dream, and he after 2 years he passed away. I said to him, do you know that whether we visit you or not, like when we come to visit you? He said, I know on the eve of Jummah, the night preceding Jummah. The nights precede the day, so Jummah night, eve, the night before. And the day of Jummah, all of it, and on Saturday until the sun rises. And he said, why not why in these days do you know compared to other days? And he said, because of the virtue and the greatness of Jummah. So there's all these narrations now, dreams and different things were mentioned where it's that Jummah and the night of Jummah, the eve of Jummah and the up to Saturday morning, up to sunrise, that in these days they are more aware, or they are aware of the person visiting them. Allahu Alam. In other narrations mentioned, I used to visit Muhammad bin Wasi every Saturday, and I used to go to the graves, give salam, make dua for them, and then I used to come back, and I saw him. I think he saw me in a dream. He said, better that if you do this on Monday, because better that you do this on Monday. And said, indeed, if you change it from Monday, because the dead, they know who visits them on the day of Jummah, the day before and the day after it. Another narration mentioned, there's many narrations, I'll skip through some of them, I won't read all of them because there's similar meaning. The Haq said, whoever visit on Saturday before sunrise, the dead know that he's visited them. He said, why is that? Because of the great status of Jummah. Another narration mentioned that the wife of Ayyub bin Ubaid, Tamadur bint Sahal, she visited the wife of Ayyub bin Ubaid, and his daughter Abu Sufyan bin Uyayna, he's one of the great Imams of Tabi'een Muhaddiseen. So his daughter came to visit. She says, where's my uncle Ayyub? And I said, he's in the masjid. And I stayed there until he came and said, oh my uncle, I saw Abu Sufyan, her father, in a dream. And he said, may Allah reward my brother Ayyub on my behalf goodness, like khair. May Allah jazahullah khair. Because he visits me a lot, and he was with me today. Ayyub said, yes, I was in a janazah. I went to this janazah, then I spent some time. I visited your father's grave. And another narration mentioned that the son of the nephew of Sufyan bin, when he died, that I used to come to his grave every day, and I missed it. And I came to one day, and when I was at the grave, I fell asleep. And I saw him, that the grave had opened up, and I saw his condition, his coffin and everything at time of death, and I cried when I saw him. And he said, why did you delay? Why did we so late? And he said, do you know about our coming? Do you know that this is not a hadith, these are dreams. So we cannot take them as like absolutes. But even they're surprised. They're ulama, they're surprised. Do you know that you come to? So it's not like a standard qati, black and white thing, absolute thing in Islam. But these experiences that Ibn Rajab has felt is worthy to maybe help explain certain things. And he said that, do you know that we come to visit you? He said, never, every time. There's never a time that we don't know that you come to visit. And when you come to visit, it makes us happy. And makes the people around me happy as well, because you make dua for us, and because after that I started visiting more often. And it mentioned in the narration that Uthman bin Sawd al-Tafawi, his mother was a great abida, and she was called the Rahiba, like the monk, the worshipper. And she passed away, and I used to visit her every Jummah, and I used to make dua for her and make istighfar for her and for the people of the graveyard. And I saw her one night in my sleep, and I said to her, oh my mother, how are you? And she said, oh my dear son, indeed the pains of death are very severe. But alhamdulillah, I praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With the praise of Allah, I'm in a Barzakh that is praiseworthy, that is praised, that's good. And the flowers, rayhan, has been spread out, and silk has brocade and silk has been spread out for me, and it will be there. All of these will be there for me till the day of judgment. He said, do you have any need, any haja? He said, and she said, yes. He said, what is it? Don't stop visiting me, and making dua for us, because indeed, every Jummah I get the glad tidings of you coming to visit me, and I'm told actually when you come to visit, an announcement is made, your son has come to visit you. An announcement comes, and he says, oh Rahiba, this is your son has arrived, like an announcement is made, and I feel very happy with that announcement. And everybody else in the graveyard also feels happy. And just the last two paragraphs, in another narration, Hafiz Abu Tahir Salafis, he said, I heard Abu Barakat Abdul Wahid Abdul Rahman Ghallab Susi in Iskandari in Alexandria in Egypt. Oh my daughter, if you come to visit me, then sit like a little while at my grave so I can look at you fully. And then, but it said that then the rahmah descends upon me, and when the rahmah comes upon me, then the rahmah is so much that it becomes a hijab, a barrier between you, and then I get busy with that. And the last one, Qustantin bin Abdullah Rumi, he said that I heard Asad Musa, he said that I had a friend who died and I saw him in a dream, and he used to say to me, Subhanallah, you went to the grave of such a friend, but you didn't come, even in death. I get upset if you go to, I guess you went to such a friend of ours, but you didn't come to me, and you didn't have any, and you made dua there, and they received the rahmah, and he said that you don't come to visit, and you don't come to visit me, and then come near to me. He goes, what? Like, he was surprised, that how could, do you know that if I'm visiting one over the, he said, he goes, when you came to visit the grave of our friend, I saw you. He goes, how could you see me? There's soil over you. And he said, don't you see when the water is in a glass? Can you not see through it? Like that, because we see who visits us or visit near us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding. These are mysteries. These are not so absolute, but it gives you a window. All these narration put together gives something that, yes, they hear, they do reply to salam. Important thing is, firstly, at the top, of course, what everybody agrees is we go to the graveyard to take a ibrah, to take a lesson that our demise is very soon, right? And we make the dua, the salam that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us. These are the top things, great. But there's more to it than that. The problem is in the extremes in this. Now that we know this information, what do we do with it? In terms of practice. So each person has to judge himself. But there is there a hukm shari'i here that you have to? Well, this is an instinctive thing people have to visit the friends and family, and even the ones that passed away as well. This instinctive thing, and that's even Amr al-As radiallahu anhu says that I want you to stay there for a little while. But then people can restrict and say this is only at the time of death when he passed away. But there's no such thing mentioned in the hadith, but people can interpret it that way. But then the other extreme is where people make a grave into a theme park, and that's, our part of the world is famous for that. We tend to, in the subcontinent, we just, I don't know what it is, but we go to the other, the other extreme. So there's a balance in this, inshallah. But all these chapters, these additional chapters, is painting a picture of a reality that exists, that the details are not, we cannot, with our senses, with our five senses, we cannot achieve. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us clarity in regards to the matters of the grave, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our graves a garden from the gardens of paradise, not a pit from the pits of hell. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khair.